Hi everyone, welcome back to FreakSense TV. I'm your host Charlie Freak. Now today is a podcast that I recorded last week with Karen from the Sun and Moon Family United, a wonderful YouTube channel that focuses predominantly on flat Earth. And Karen and Patricia had me on for part one of a two-part series on flat Earth, why it matters and where it leads us to. And where, of course, it leads us to, as you'll see in all of my work, is an understanding of the sky above, which is astrology, and what is below. And that would be the Holy Land, these ancient, soulful, spiritual texts that have been written and left for us, and of course, human physiology. And it completes the gnosis of who we are, why we're here, and what our purpose is. So what I've done is put a video package together with the presentation that I did on Karen's channel. I'll give you a link so that you can watch or listen to the original podcast on Karen's channel. And again, here I've added a wonderful video package to help with the full understanding and explanation of all that was shared. You know, it really was a truly great podcast, and the information within is extremely important. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this part one of a two-part series, Flat Earth, Why It Matters, Where It Leads Us To, which is God, and Elegant Design, which is the human being. Enjoy.
Hello everybody, I am putting out a hangout I had earlier with Charlie from FreakSense TV. He's a very wise person, has a lot to say, but you won't hear me. You're hearing me now, but in the hangout because, well, now that YouTube have changed their hangout things, I don't particularly like either version because communicating with people, and as the only way you can do it on YouTube is to do it one yourself and go live, have a chat room. Mine was about talking to people, and I'm not sure if I like that we're shoved off somewhere else, and it actually says, well, a lot of the functions aren't there like with Hangout, so we'll add them later on, and it'll all to be to do with money, so we do it a different way, so recording it. But when I record, it's either records the screen perfectly or me perfectly, but not both together. But as you know who I am on these videos I make, we were talking to Charlie, so the most important thing is to hear Charlie, so you won't hear me because I recorded Charlie. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy, and hopefully it's just another insight to understand that what they're doing. Anyway, enjoy. Hopefully you enjoy this hangout. Thank you very much.
Hi Karen, how are you doing today? Hi Patricia.
Hi Karen, hi Charlie.
Yeah, I think that it would be great if we could have a discussion today on flat Earth, but why it matters, where it leads us to, and what this massive truth is and why it is so important. And really, it should be the guiding principle to all truthers, because it leads to the holistic or full understanding of all things. It encompasses all things. It is the main thing. And again, yeah, it is. This what's so important to understand about flat Earth is that it teaches us that this is elegant design and that there is a creator. And the moment that you come to understand that all of this is a miraculous, magical creation that connects us both inwards, inside of us, and outwards, so physically and metaphysically, physically or spiritually, then everything takes on a whole new meaning and level of understanding. So what's really, really important to understand with the discovery that the Earth is flat, stationary, at the center of all things, has a firmament, and that we are powered by an electromagnetic ether, is this understanding that everything is holistically designed, and that in the one truth, of the creator, which is creation, that everyone and everything, not just human beings, but all sentient beings, are all connected powerfully together. So in essence, we're all one. We are all part of the one, which is, that's right. That's exactly right. And that's how based on in what I teach and what I share on FreakSense TV and through my books, to prove, it's very easy to prove that what I share is the truth and the holistic truth. All you have to do is just simply observe how organized society, and remember that includes all aspects of society that are organized together. So it's not just government. That means corporations, business, the business world, they're all hand in hand, and religion as well. They're all organized. They're all on the same team. They're all working together for the one goal. And their one goal is that the few will continue to rule over the many. And that's it. They don't really have any other agenda. They use other smaller agendas to constantly confuse us and to turn us on one another, so that we are focusing on things that do not matter. In a way, well, we certainly are. I mean, they are the creators of communism. They're the creators of all of these isms. There's only one thing, and that is what we could say is oneism, monoism, godism, and that's just what we see and observe around us, inside and outside, and that is God's creation. So what we're here for, why all of this matters and what we're here for, is to switch on, to be living aware in the single moment that exists, and then just observe. And we observe that we're surrounded by this incredible perfect creation, which is Mother Earth. She truly is. She's alive. She's measurable. She's perfect. All of her systems, all of the components of Mother Earth are all attempting to achieve. That's right. And that's an excellent point to bring up, Karen. And it's a very, very important point, because creation is far beyond all of us. And therefore, this ridiculous notion that we can destroy creation by splitting an atom, harnessing enormous amounts of power, and turning them into some kind of weapon or bomb, and then detonating a bomb that could undo the creator's creation, is pure nonsense. It's just another one of these massive lies that they use to fear. That's right, to make us fear and to control us. It's just another lie. So at the heart of what you just said, and at the heart of what you're saying, is that if all of this is perfect, elegant design by a creator, and that all creation is in the hands of the creator and out of our hands, then there's two things that are very commonsensically or freakisensically easily understood. And they are, one, that since we have no role in the creation of what is, then all we need to be focusing on and concerning ourselves with is the interaction with creation and the enjoyment of creation. And secondly, the second obvious thing is simply that if we have no involvement in the creation of this perfect earth, then we can have no role in its destruction. So this notion of splitting an atom, which you can't see, and all of this notion of they lie about everything. And again, on FreakSense TV, the very first series that I generated and put out was a 7-part series with some excellent guests on each part of the 7 series. And the assertion is, the title of the series was "Everything You Know Is a Lie. Would you like to hear some truth?" And it literally is. Every single thing that we have been told via organized society, so through schools, on television, in movies, newspapers, radio, the whole the whole bit is designed to do what you said at the very beginning, which is to take us away from the Heavenly Father, to take us away from the physical mother. So there's the sacred, spiritual, metaphysical, heavenly Father consciousness, Father energy, masculine, and then there is the sacred feminine energy of the earth. So you have this perfect duality. Oh, the list does go on and on and on, because it's designed to break down the big I, and the big I is individuality or individualism. Because if you just commonsensically, freaksensically, just observe this, how does the eternal, perfect, unique, one-off, never will be another one of you or I, perfect individual creations, how does that fit in to this construct that they've created of organized society and the greater good, right? So we all give up our freedoms for the greater good, because we can't take care of ourselves, we can't protect ourselves, so we need security, we need to live together. But it's not really living together, is it? It's living under the mechanism and the rules of the group. That's right, They Live. That's right, the movie They Live. And the reason they do that, because again, through the construct, we'll get back into this in just a sec, the fullness of it, because it's really important for people to understand. But this concept of ownership and this us participating in a world of fake money, and a certain group of people create into existence fake money, and then they buy off everyone and everything. They are recruiting, hiring with this fake money the brightest minds that are looking into the human mind. And one of the things that they've learned is that with our subconscious is that it's basically like a recorder, and that it's on all the time, and it observes via this continuous recording all things that it's hearing. So even if you're not really aware of what's going on, because they're transmitting a message either visually, optically, or just via sounds, even if you're not completely aware of what it's doing, your subconscious is recording it, and then that message is being placed inside of you. And again, that is recorded and stored in the left hemisphere of your brain. And if you operate only in the left, or what the Bible calls the carnal hemisphere of your brain, then you're trapped, and you are an absolute victim, because the left hemisphere of your brain is filled up with the lies that they constantly pump into us from the moment we're born. Exactly right. And the only way, and this is going to lead us back into the title of the show today, or the focus for the show today, which is, elegant design and the creator, is that the only way for you to know, the only way for you to discover truth, is to go within. And this is what the Bible says, the Bhagavad Gita says. That's exactly right. And again, this is why, see, the thing that people need to understand when you're sharing this with friends and family who aren't buying into the concept that everything is a lie and everything is a conspiracy, and those are both absolutely true, is that at the heart of who they are and what they are doing is the fact that they're a tiny group, and a tiny group trying to control the many are very fearful and afraid. They're afraid because if we ever wake up, it's over for them in a heartbeat, because our sheer numbers. That's right. In fact, this is, again, going back to what we were talking just a little earlier with the big I, individuality. There's no room for an individual within society. And this is why you have advertising. See, and I wanted to inject this because it's such a key point. For everyone, I want you to listen to this and absorb it, because because this is absolute truth. And the moment you take the time to absorb this and understand it, you can't argue with it, because it absolutely is provable and factual. And that's this: all money now in the world, not just the Western world, but the Eastern world as well, every single country now has their money provided to them. All governments have handed over the creation and the monitoring of their money and economies into the hands of these federal banks. And these federal banks are all private, and they're all the same. They're all the exact same private group. Private, they call themselves bankers. They're not bankers. There's no such thing as banking. There's no such thing as economy. That's right. They're all fake. It's all, and I've done podcasts on that, and you've done great shows with Martin Kinney and others telling you that the entire English language has been hijacked into what's called legalese, and this ridiculous, notion. And again, it's all designed to take away the individual and to make you a cog in the wheel of the greater good, organized society. So the individual cannot exist. So at the heart of all of this is a group of people who create all money into existence in every single country. So I want you to understand this. That means that this hidden group of people that nobody really ultimately knows who it is responsible for the printing or the creation by zeros and ones on a computer of all currencies and all countries in the world without oversight. And this is crucial for everyone to understand: without oversight. So that means that our money, the money that everyone spends their entire lives chasing down because things cost money and you have to try and live, is completely fake. So why? Why do things cost money? Therefore, why do we spend our lives in jobs trying to earn money? And the source of all of this is the fact that they turned God's creation, which is what you noticed brilliantly at the beginning of this podcast. And you said, it's creation and nobody knows how it was done or when it was done, and nobody owns it. It's just elegant creation. So it all started by making land cost money, because everybody in this game of Monopoly has to find a place to get a chair, put it down, and sit down somewhere. So you have to have what's called a home. And in this sick, twisted, bizarre, upside down reality we find ourselves in, land costs money. Now, again, think about the insanity of this, folks, that even in their system of law, ownership of something is in the hands of whoever possesses it. Possession is 90% of the law. Okay, so if land can be owned, which is ridiculous, if land can be owned and has value, then how is it that a tiny group of white guys, white gentlemen who are hidden in the shadows, how is it that they own all the land when possession is 9/10 of the law? In other words, whoever came before us under this system of rule are the owners of the land because they were here first. So how did all of these indigenous peoples all over this beautiful flat plain come to no longer own their land, and that the ownership of all of this land, which, and again, it cannot be owned, it's ridiculous, is in the hands of a hidden few? Well, all of these terms like economy, economics, and depression, recession, or bull markets, and all of these things, they're all, that's right, yeah, they're all invented. None of this stuff is real. It's just a group of people that sat down and said that, well, we have to create. Right. Think about this. Everyone, again, we'll get back to the full explanation in just a sec. But again, with war, think about this. Wars are not being legitimately fought between two groups or two interests or two different nations for altruistic reasons or whatever. They're all on the same side. Remember, at the heart of all of this is a tiny group that wants to maintain their power over us, and that the only agenda they have is therefore to maintain their control over us, so that everything they do is designed to distract us and get us to fight amongst ourselves. That's the only purpose. That's right. And so at the heart of all of this, folks, and I want to just tie this together because it's so important, is that so this group that has control and power, they've stolen the land away from those who came first. Possession 9/10 of the law, they stole it away from everyone who came first, and under their understanding and their system of law would therefore have owned all of this land and be millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, because they owned all the land. So they stole it, and then what they did is they created pieces of paper with official stamps on it, backed by a system of law run by a court system of people who uphold the law. It's their law, it's their words, it's their paper. That's right. And all of their judges are not impartial and fair, and they're not blind. They're blind to the truth, and because they work for whoever controlled all of this. So everything is fake. So now I'm going to share something with everyone, and when I do this, it often really blows people away, and it takes them a little bit of time to fully wrap their minds around this, but it's very important for you to understand. With this notion and this understanding that land can't be owned, and that the ownership of the land now rests in the hands of a few people, and they stole it away from all those who had under their system of rules, had the right to own it, possession being 9/10 of the law. So we see that this entire system of ownership, and therefore a value on land, forces people to work, because if land has a value and costs, then you have to earn something to be able to afford land. So what is important to understand is that business, economics, jobs are all invented. There is not a single need for any corporation. Why? They already own everything. All of the money that exists in the world is being printed by this hidden group in every single country. And remember, there's no oversight. There is no single body within any single government of any single country that has the right to question or understand how much is being printed, who is it being given to, what are the names of the people who are behind this? Nothing. The elected leaders of each populace in each different nation have no rights to know how any of this is put into place and where the money's going and who gets it and all of this. And yet these are the people that make up the rules in terms of how you get access to the money. They're the ones that create usury and charge interest on these loans, which is impossible. You cannot have interest because all that exists is the principal. The moment you charge an interest for the principal, it's just like your analogy with the island, 10 people, 10 shares, and then an immigrant shows up and would be the 11th. The moment you accept their money into the system, there's now more money. There's now more people and more money than what the original principal can handle, because there's 10 shares, 1,000 or 10,000 each for a total of 10,000 or 100,000. That's all that exists. You can't charge interest on top of principal because you're bankrupting the system in the moment, because the principal does not now have enough to pay back the totality of what's been invested into it. So exactly. And so, but with the system of rules, it means that this is a game of monopoly, literally, because everyone will eventually go bankrupt. And that's the whole design of this system, this fake system, is to ensure that everyone will eventually go bankrupt, because it's the small fish that run out of money first and with nowhere else to turn have to declare And so the few own more and more and more, and the many own less and less and less, and become weaker and weaker and weaker. And so this is what, right, that's right. And yeah, and you can't create any more money into existence, because all that was there in the first place, whatever you said was there and whatever value you placed to it, that's what we would call the principle, and that's what is. So you can't charge interest against it, nor can you add anything else to it, take from it or add to it, because then you're devaluing all that there is. So, and that's the basic precept. Yeah. So what we see is that the entire system is false, and that the only reason that money truly exists in the first place, when they own everything and they print all of it into existence without oversight, it means the only reason that there's an economy and that there are jobs is to give us something to do. And this is what's so important, and this is what ties into flat earth. Because if we had time on our hands, if we truly understood why we're here, which is to just be students of nature, both outer nature, Mother Earth, and inner nature, our Heavenly Father God, that's right. Well, we would be living, and we'd be living within two realms. Daytime out there interacting with Mother Earth, providing all the things that we need, food and shelter and clothing. And if we don't know how to do something, we learn from somebody else, or we exchange with somebody else. And this is how you create friends and what's called extended family or little community. And you don't need any laws. You just depend on one another. And when you depend on one another, there's no way that anyone's going to break a law, because, yeah, that's absolutely right. That is absolutely true. And just a quick interjection here about what you said about plastic food and plastic supermarkets. Supermarkets are not selling real food, even right down to the fruits and vegetables, because fruits and vegetables are meant to be picked off the vine. They're meant to be picked when they are ripe. Because like when a baby is born and the umbilical cord, the baby with the umbilical cord comes out of the mother and eventually along with the placenta, it's this exchange of knowledge, this exchange of strength, wisdom, of purity that comes through the vine, the umbilical cord or vine, into the fruit or the baby from the roots or essence, the placenta. And this is why we grow up big, strong, we don't get sick, and we don't need, exactly right. And there, in fact, so much of what's sold in the northern hemisphere is produced in the southern hemisphere, and then they ship it enormous distances and the only reason is as an excuse to pick everything when it's still green. When you pick everything off the vine when it is not mature, you're taking all of the maturity, or what's known as wisdom, out of the fruit and the vegetable. And this is where, like I said, with supermarkets, even the fruits and vegetables are just empty foods, because their essence, all of their gifts from God, all of the wisdom and all of the strength that they give us to fight off any infection is not present. And it's not present because they pick it early. And this sacred process, which is the same as birthing, giving birth to a human baby, is the same process. And again, think about it. In hospitals, what's the first thing that doctors do when the baby comes out of the womb? This sacred, beautiful, peaceful place of deep meditation and connection to God. The first thing they do, they clamp off the umbilical cord. And as soon as they possibly can, they then sever it. They cut it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because all universities and all departments in universities, including the medical departments, their curriculum is determined by the donors to these universities. And the donors to these universities are corporations, and that doesn't matter. It's just the small group of people. They just use different names and different faces all the time to try to get away with it. But They are determining the curriculum, and doctors are being taught against common sense to smack a baby when it's first born because, that takes the water off the lungs and they can breathe. And this is ridiculous. It's an act of violence. It's an act of violence to kick you out of the right hemisphere of your brain, connection to God, and into the carnal world of your left brain. Fear, fear, fear. Everything they do is fear. And they want to sever the umbilical cord as fast as possible so that all of this nutrition, all of these natural secretions that are coming from the placenta do not make it into the baby, and our kids are not born with the same level of protection that just anyone born to a midwife or just born on their own with in the home would naturally have. And that's what you said. They've taken nature away, they've taken God away, and they've replaced it with violence. And think about flat Earth versus globular Earth. What is this nonsense notion coming from Copernicus and others that the Earth is supposedly spherical and that it is spinning spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and it has movement in 5 different directions, totaling well over 1 million miles per hour of movements. We feel none of it. We see none of it. We observe the stars in the sky for as long as it's ever been recorded. They're in the same place. They follow the same pattern. Exactly right. And again, here's the thing that even flat earthers forget. Go back 100 years, and if you can find people who are 90 something or 100 years old, which is becoming less and less plausible, because they're poisoning us at these overwhelming rates and levels, and people are just dying younger and younger and younger. It's unbelievable, and horrific diseases. If you can find these people who are around 100 years old, you'll find a lot of them were actually taught in their schools that the Earth was flat and stationary. So they like to tell us that this notion of globular Earth, well, we've always known it. It's just some religious kooks that, thousands of years ago thought it was flat. And we didn't get around to changing it until, 500 years ago. But we've all known. Anyone with a brain has known that the Earth is round. It isn't true. This notion of a globular Earth essentially rests with the invention of universities and this private education and then corporate funded public education. They're the ones that began to teach these truths. And there are people like Nikola Tesla, who was considered during his time, even by Einstein himself, as the smartest man known to within the public of society, the smartest man. Tesla didn't believe in any of this. His experiments talked and proved the electromagnetic ether. And he said the natural downward causation of electricity from on high down low is what they were confused and mixing up as gravity. There is no gravity. There cannot be any kind of gravity. Obviously, if there were, ages ago, our moon would have crashed into the Earth. That's right. And this is what they teach us as well. Basically what they say, why do we die and why do we only live about 70 years or whatever? Like, ultimately, what's killing us? Well, gravity, and the system that allows all of this to exist is killing us at the same time. Don't you love that? That their random creation that happened a bajillion years ago, where nothing randomly turned into everything and continues to expand, going against the first law of thermodynamics, which states that everything over time will essentially decompose, slow down, break down, and fall apart. Well, the universe isn't. It just continuously, miraculously expands. And of course, they need it to, because they need their distances to be so massive to be able to discount the hit you over the head obvious truth of Polaris, or the North Star. which never moves. Why does Polaris never move? Well, because it's fajillion, babillion, mammillion, cajillion miles away. That's why it's moving. It's just that it'll just take millions of years before we're able to notice even the slightest movement, because it's so far away. Really? Because I'll tell you what, the sun and the moon, they sure look very, very close. They look like local phenomenons to me. And I, here in Mexico, many times with sunrises and sunsets, I have seen clouds going behind the sun. So how is it possible for one of our moisture clouds to be millions, 93 million miles away from us, and I can see it, and it's going behind the sun, this nuclear furnace? Wouldn't it preclude? It doesn't space is a void, and there can't be any moisture in space. How are clouds out in space, and how is the sun miraculously not evaporating? It's just constant ridiculous. Like you said, it is the big joke. It is so ridiculous, as Tesla said. It's so ridiculous, but we are the kooks. And yet, like I was sharing with you, go back 100 years. This is what people were taught. This is what people knew. Everybody knew that the earth was flat, stationary, at the center of all things, and that there's a creator. That's right. On record, every single ancient culture knew, not guessed, knew, because they spoke with absolute certainty, and all of their predictions about things such as, even the eclipses were all perfectly accurate, all based on the model of flat, stationary, at the center of all things. The Egyptian astrologer Ptolemy, just by observing the night sky, basically speaks everything that to the Bible, to what the Bible speaks about, or the Koran, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Buddhist Sutras. Everything that is in all of these ancient spiritual texts was all being said by the Egyptian astrologer Ptolemy, because all he did is look at the sky. And the reason that it's in these sacred texts, because all those sacred texts are all based on the message in the night sky. That's why astrology is the truth, and astronomy is the big con, cover-up, and the lie. Astrology tells the story of God's creation, and it's in the sky for anyone to see and understand if they simply take the time to spend time instead of being inside watching TV. That's why TV exists, is to get you inside at night time, where your mind can be dumbed down and controlled, instead of outside around a fire, laughing, talking, singing, sharing a treat, sharing a snack, looking up into the sky and imagining, looking up into the sky and noticing beautiful things about our beautiful creation. It's all there. Yeah, exactly. And again, just think of why. The number 12 is everywhere. Number 12 symbolically, or within symbology, represents completion of God's creation. That's why it's everywhere in all of these sacred texts, number 12. That's why the day has 12 hours, because it is its own entity, it's its own creation. And the night has 12 hours, because it is its own entity, it's its own creation. And they're connected, as we all are, but they're polar opposites, which everything within creation is. Light and darkness, on and off, male and female, up and down, left and right. Everything within creation is a polarity. And the reason is so that it gives this infinite playground for our gift of free will to play itself out. And this is the only freedom that truly exists. The choices that we make in every single moment through our free will allow us true freedom, because with the polarities, everything is a polarity. It's not just that the sun and the moon are the only polarities. Everything is a polarity. And I'll I'll get into that a little later. But everything is a polarity. So the choices that we make every single moment are free will choices between what's light and what's darkness. And there's an infinite array of choices that we can have between light and dark. And that means that we can never replicate the same moment, the same hour, the same day, the same month, the same year. It's always going to be fresh and different because everything is a polarity, an opposite. And between these opposites lies infinite choices. This is the only freedom that we have. And so once again, if what I'm saying is the truth, then it should be borne out in everything that organized society does. And think about it. Everything they do isn't so much through actual acting out on things. It's always threats. They are threatening us constantly, or they are manipulating us constantly because they understand God's creation. They cannot do anything to it. So the only power that they truly have is to predetermine our infinite choices into one or two choices out of fear. Because as soon as we embrace fear, our brain changes. We go out of the higher or the midbrain, out of the right brain. That's exactly right. And that's why Hollywood and TV look and appear so real, because that's what organized society is. And again, people think that, and they're one of the worst organized religion. People think that these men who go into these positions of power within religion are men of God. They don't love God. They're not connected to God. They don't follow any teachings of God. These are sick, evil people playing roles to help the few control the many. They have nothing to do with God. And that's why all literal Christians, I hate to say this because that takes up, virtually 99% plus, but it's not just Christianity. It's, literal Muslims or literal Buddhists, or that's, I mean, it really is true in that regard. And again, organized religion exists to tell people what these sacred texts mean. So when you read them for yourself, you go, oh my God, do you know what? Like everything about the Christ Jesus is like the sun in the sky. And every time he does something with the apostles, or every time he does something wandering around the Holy Land, he's always doing something that relates directly to the month or the moon or the astrological sun sign that was currently happening at the time. So again, Jesus was, the story of Jesus, that he died on a cross, is because in the northern hemisphere, the sun sinks into the bowels of the earth, the very, very bottom of the earth in December, towards the end of December. And in the sky, you see that the path of the sun is accounted for in the night sky. And you watch how the path of the sun and the path of Orion's belt and the three kings, the three stars that are essentially in a line in the middle of Orion. No, not really. It's all the same, because remember that there's only one pole. And of course, we commonsensically know this. Everyone knows this, because you can be standing on what they call Antarctica, which is, some kind of frozen island or frozen set of mountains, in the Antarctic Sea. And you can be standing on Antarctica, and no matter who you are or which compass you use, it's always pointing north. How's that fucking possible? Well, I'll tell you what, it's possible because the South Pole doesn't really remain stationary. It just keeps sort of moving, and it goes here, there, and everywhere. Okay, well, if that were true, and there were two poles, then all it would mean is that your compass needle pointing south would just move a little bit here, there, and everywhere. Yep, there's lots of videos out there, and there's lots of people who have been there and have done it. And constantly the needle is pointing north. And that's why, because there's only one pole. It's not a pole per se, it's just the center. It is, and it needs to be. We won't get into this today because it's far too complex and lengthy to do so, but it also needs to be. The very center, the North Pole, needs to be a powerful source of magnetism. And then the outer edges of everything, which is a torus field, that's where we exist within this electromagnetic field, which will always take the shape of a torus field. The outer edge is magnetism. So the inner point or axle, the inner point or axle needs to be magnetized. The outer edge needs to be magnetized, and everything else inside of that is electricity. So you have magnetism, which controls, creates the boundaries, and shapes electricity. And that's the electromagnetic ether that we live within. So electricity just constantly comes down from on high to us within this grand shape that, by the way, then does kind of look like a sphere. It does kind of look like that we would be part of a spherical object, because that is the very shape and nature of the ether that surrounds us, holding in the sea above from the seas below, from the ocean below, the ocean above from the ocean below. And it's all done through magnetism. And Tesla went into great detail about how the sun and the moon and the wandering stars, or what are known as planets, exist inside of the firmament. And they wander, they move about, they follow their patterns through what Tesla described as magnetic levitation. And this is how the military is capable of doing a number of things to convince us that there are aliens out there, because they've also mastered the technology of levitation via magnetism. So there's only one pole, that's the North Pole, at the center of all things. So for the people in the southern hemisphere, it's all still the same. They're just further away. They're just further away. And the further you go within this experience of ours, and you can just tell by your eyesight, the vanishing point is different. The vanishing point where everything runs high and low, side to side, it all comes to a single center point at eye level, is simply different. And that's why they experience a slightly different experience, is because they have a different vanishing point to ours, because we are simply closer to the center of all things, which is this North Pole. And when you start talking about things like the North Pole, and of course, who lives at the North Pole, right? Santa Claus. And Santa Claus works furtively all year long to be able to create presents, right? For all the good children, Santa is working hard all year long to create gifts. Well, the thing is, it should, if you heard the true story of who Santa Claus really is, and the gift that Santa gives for free, and it isn't one time a year, it's 13 times a year. And so again, the reason that we do have a center point and a North Pole is that ties in not just with the story in the sky astrology, but it ties into human physiology and the human body. And again, this is why they create jobs for us, and everything costs money. So we spend our whole, that's right. It's our perspective vision. And again, if you were simply taught this from the get-go, if you understood this, then you would understand creation. You would understand what it is you're looking at, and not buy into some lie. But they don't teach the truth, they teach lies. So we are pushed into this false reality of things costing money, and therefore we need to work. And so all our time is spent struggling, doing things we don't want to do, and trying to chase down dollars. And inflation always outgrows the raise, so we constantly fall behind, further behind, and then you're living off your credit cards, and then it's just fear. Meaning, we never take the time to just sit down, relax, and think, and truly evolve mentally. That's right. We don't think out of knowingness and trust and strength. We think out of not knowing, which are lies, weakness and fear. That's the left brain. The right brain, which is only achievable via meditation, going within, meditating, is the realm of God. That's 90% of the brain's capacity. The dime brain, that's why it's called the dime brain, our left hemisphere of the brain, is only 10% of the brain's capacity. Why? Because the left brain is tied in powerfully to our fear instincts, and fear limits us. So the left brain, which is basically how everything in organized society is and runs. Of course, exactly. Like the pyramids. Again, we are so ignorant. We are such ignorant children that we don't have the first idea of what even the true shape of the pyramids are. Most people don't even know that the pyramids continue on underneath the ground. Wasn't that the big revelation just a few years ago, that on Easter Island, the images that were created, the statues that were created, actually continued on underneath the ground? Really? Geez, I just thought maybe they were glued there or something, like my doll set or something. Again, we're such children with such weak minds that are just constantly being led to the slaughter all the time because we know so little. The pyramids continue on underneath the ground, and they replicate the shape above. It's just opposite, because the shape above, if you look at it, people say, yeah, it's a triangle. Well, it's a triangle pointing up, so it's a phallic symbol. And the phallic symbol is simply a manifestation, representation of the masculine. So it's above ground because that's heading towards heaven. That's the higher spiritual mind, which is the Father, which is the Father consciousness or God. And then the shape of the pyramids underneath the ground is the same triangle, but upside down, connected, because that's a womb. And a womb gives birth or life. It creates life in the earth, of the earth, because that's Mother Earth, of this earth, physical. And that's why the feminine, the sacred feminine shape of the pyramid is below the ground, and the phallic symbol of the pyramid is above the ground. That is the metaphysical Father reaching out to truth and peace in heaven, and the physical Mother rooted in the earth itself. And then if you go inside of the Great Pyramid, the pyramids, the most famous in Egypt, and you go inside the Great Pyramid, you will find that there is a central chamber. And the central chamber of the Great Pyramid is exactly the same representation in size of the very center of the human brain, which is known as the optic thalamus, or the third ventricle of the brain. And that up and to the right of this middle chamber, located right in the middle of the pyramid design, is up and to the right is the king's chamber. And that is the exact size and location of the pineal gland to the optic thalamus. And a little down and to the left of the central chamber is the queen's chamber. And that is an exact representation of the pituitary gland. And so now you're looking at the very center of the human brain. Exactly. And because they were connected to God. That's what all of these ancient societies taught, that they were tapping into what are known as the Akashic records. The Akashic records are these books that hold all information, and they're books that have a spine but no pages. And the Akashic records do not exist within the physical realm. They exist within the metaphysical realm. And to be able to access all that we know in any single moment, all you have to do is get away from the insanity of this physical, carnal, left brain driven world, going inside, which is what the Bible, Bhagavad Gita, Koran, Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Buddhist Sutras, they all talk about. Go to the right via meditation, go into the right hemisphere of the brain. It's always the stories, these allegorical stories within all of these books. They're all just symbolic stories. None of the people, I'm sorry if this offends some of the listeners, but it's the truth. None of the people in the Bible ever existed. This is not a book about history 2 or 5 or 8,000 years ago. These are timeless, ageless, allegorical tales about astrology and human physiology. It truly is, but what I will say is that once you, and this is what I'm going to be starting very soon on our YouTube channel, FreakSense TV, we're going to be starting a series called the Gnostic Warrior. And these are all the people who have existed through time, through human history, that have come before us and have shared these sacred truths in various forms of artistic creation. And they've encoded the truth for fear of their lives, but they've put it in plain sight. And so you just exactly. And yet everything that Jesus says throughout the New Testament is saying that we are exactly like him, and that Jesus is within God, and we are within Jesus, and Jesus is within us. And that's because Jesus, or the Christos, he's never called, there is no, in the original Greek text that made up the Bible, not once is anyone anywhere named, called by the name Jesus or Jesus. Jesus is some guy from Puerto Rico. There was no guy from Puerto Rico wandering around the Holy Land 2,000 years ago. Didn't happen. Sorry if that bursts your bubble, but there was nobody named Jesus. The Christos in Greek means anointed oil. And we just happen to have an incredible, provable, the ancients have known about this and built their entire civilizations around the understanding of the anointed oil within us and the psychophysical seed that is baby Jesus within us. And it's this incredible story of the chrism oil. And from the age of 12 onwards, every single human being, 13 times a year, because if our calendar was the real calendar, then it would be based on the passages of the moon around us. And the passage of the moon is done in 13 moons, which are now called months. They just took one of the O's away and turned moons into months. So a month is a month, and there are 13 of them. That's right. Yeah, it's just more subterfuge that they do to us to disconnect us from the harmony of Mother Nature and God's creation. So 13 times a year, we're gifted two things, and they're gifted simultaneously. Down in the solar plexus, so just upper stomach, just below the chest, is the solar plexus. And plexus just means place. So this is the solar place of the sun within the body. Sun is what we call Jesus Christ, or Christ Jesus from the Bible. And 13 times a year, once every month, on during these very sacred times within each of us, a psychophysical seed. So it's partially metaphysical, it's partially physical, and an actual seed is produced in the solar plexus. Okay, an actual seed. This is science. It's provable. We've known about it for thousands and thousands of years, and all the ancients, that's all they did. They wrote about this. At the same time, up at the top of our brain, into the center of our brain, there is something called the chrism oil. And the chrism oil is made up of the milk and the honey. The milk from Mary and the honey from Joseph. And they are created in a place at the very center back of the skull, the very really sort of highest point of the brain, at a place called the claustrum. But that's where medicine comes from. Medicine is simply taken from God's creation. It's all related back to flat Earth. This is why they all use the same terms. They don't know shit. they just simply take God's creation and then they bastardize it to their own ends. That's why they're all the same names. So in this place called the claustrum is produced 13 times a year at the same time that the psychophysical seed is created within the solar plexus is the milk and the honey, milk from Mary, honey from Joseph at the top of our brain at the place called the claustrum. And the ancients called this place the holy or sainted claustrum, sainted claustrum, Santa Claus. Santa Claus, who lives at the North Pole. The claustrum is the north point, the north center north of the human skull or the human brain. Yeah, it's really cool. And listen to this. Where the claustrum is located, there is this opening that runs directly down in a chimney-like structure that runs from the claustrum on high down into the center of our brain, known as the optic thalamus or the third ventricle, the very center of the brain where the pineal and the pituitary glands are. And this science calls this tunnel, this chimney, they call it a foramen. For a man. What did Jesus say in the Bible? My name is Amen. Amen. I am it because I am for all men. And the foramen is the chimney. Santa Claus at the North Pole produces a substance called the chrism, Christ oil, and drops it down the chimney for free into the very, very center of our existence, which is the center of our brain, the third ventricle, the optic thalamus. And there, half of it goes to the pituitary gland, which is Mary, the sacred feminine, which is magnetic, which is negatively charged, and is spoiled relatively easily, like milk itself. After just a few days, the milk from Santa Claus will actually spoil. That's why Santa needs to drink the honey cookies and the milk that night, because if he doesn't, the milk will spoil. And the other half goes to the pineal gland. The pineal gland, a representation of the sun. So the pineal gland is Joseph, is the honey, is golden in color, just like the sun, and is preserved. So when Jacob says in the Bible, in Genesis, that I went and met God face to face in a place called Pineal, and my life was preserved, because that's the preservative that is created when you activate the pineal gland, is this honey-like substance, which can last for a long, long time, forever. So this electrical, not magnetic, like the milk in the pituitary gland, milk, pituitary, magnetic, honey from Joseph, pineal gland, electrical, positively charged versus negatively charged, doesn't spoil, it's preserved. They're exact polar opposites, just like all creation. And then they go down these two snakes that exist, and absolutely do, that wrap themselves around and around about the spine, called these two central nerves, the Ida and the Pingalas. Ida for the pituitary gland, Pingala for the pineal. That's how you remember them. Pineal gland, Pingala nerve, and then the Ida for the pituitary. And they take these two substances down as they crisscross the spine all the way down to a place below our belly button in our lower abdomen called the sacral plexus. Plexus meaning place, sacral meaning, the theory behind that just simply ties into the creation that exists in the sacral plexus. So here's what happens 13 times a year, once every month in our existence. When the milk and the honey from Joseph and Mary go down the Ida and the Pingala, wrapping around the spine, they go down into the sacral plexus. At the same time, the psychophysical seed, which is in the solar plexus, the sun, which is the seed, baby Jesus, that seed drops down at the same time into the sacral plexus as well. And in the sacral plexus, there actually is, right in our as part of the sacrum, that part of the spine, the 5 fused vertebrae together, there is a little indentation, like a little cave for Krishna, or manger for baby Jesus. Baby Jesus was born in a manger. The manger being this little opening or depression in the sacral plexus. And there, yeah, exactly. If they, again, just from birth or from young age, if they simply shared this, that's right. Well, remember, once you understand how the Bible is written, the Bible is telling you this story. That's what the whole New Testament is. And the book of Matthew in particular is the most stunning. The Bible has gone from, for my experience, one of the most ridiculed books in my collection to my absolute favorite. And I simply can't put it down because it's the most brilliant, truthful, entertaining book story of all time, because it's the holistic truth of who we are. You just have to know how to read it. You have to be able to read it for yourself and not listen to these ridiculous controllers, these gatekeepers known as priests or pastors or holy men that work for organized society and lie to us, telling us that it's a history book and that these people existed a couple of thousand years ago, and that Jonah, who was a disbeliever and was teetering about on a boat and on the Sea of Galilee in a storm, and he just happened to fall over and fall right into the stomach of a large fish, perhaps a whale. And then inside of these, whales or large fish, it's all just methane gas where you'd be dead within seconds. But he's there for 3 days, which we'll get to in just a sec, the importance of 3 days. And then, yeah, so just like, Jonah, and then after 3 days, the whale vomits and spits Jonah out onto the land, and he comes out of this silence, darkness, deprivation for 3 days, and he's a believer, and he's now a crusader for God, because he spent 3 days in silence in the center of this large object. Exactly right. And the power of the right hemisphere of the brain versus the fear of the left hemisphere of the brain. 90% is the right, 10%, the dime brain, is the left brain, because it's fear. Yeah, so in this incredible story, we have Mary and Joseph coming down to the manger in the sacral plexus at the exact same time that the psychophysical seed of baby Jesus coming from the solar plexus, and they fertilize the seed, and then the seed then spends the next 33 years, and that's just a metaphor for the 33 vertebrae of the spine. And that's, by the way, you could maybe add this in for the podcast if possible. I'll send you the image. If you look at an aerial view of the Holy Land from the Sea of Galilee in the north to the Dead Sea in the south, with the Jordan River connecting them, the Jordan River looks identical to the human spine. The Sea of Galilee looks identical to a human skull. And the Dead Sea looks identical to the human sacrum. That's everything is encoded. In the night sky, they tell this story. On earth, in the Holy Land, it tells this story. In all of these sacred texts, it tells the story. In the human body, it tells the story. That's why every single culture tells the same story. That's why the story of Christ is identical to Krishna. That's why the story of Christ is identical to Horus. That's why it's identical to Buddha and to Mithra and to Dionysus. And you go through all of these sun gods, they all have the same story, because it's the exact same astrological story within the sky. So they arrive at this sacred place at the same time. Mary and Joseph, the mothers and the father, they fertilize the seed, and then Jesus climbs up inside the spine. How many vertebrae does the spine have? 33. And the 33rd vertebrae is at the very top. It acts like a capstone, just like the capstone of the Great Pyramid. It's all symbolically tied in. And it's called Atlas. And Atlas, the actual 33rd vertebrae in the human body in a medical dictionary is known as Atlas. And Atlas holds the weight of the world. And the weight of the world is the skull, which protects and houses the magical mind of God's realm. So you got the separation between the body and the mind. And so at the age of 33, so Jesus lives for 33 years, and he eventually gets to in his journeys, a place called Golgotha. And at Golgotha, there's a mount called Calvary. Well, Golgotha and Calvary both mean skull. And so in the body at 33, the spine runs out and it connects to the skull. So you have the same problem physically and metaphysically, that Christ has to somehow get into the brain, into the skull. The problem is that it's separated between the mind and the body, are separated with the physical body and the atlas, this super strong bone in the body, into the mind. So a miracle needs to occur, and this is crucifixion. Crucifixion does not mean to be nailed to a cross. It is just another lie told to us by the church, and the churches, they're all holy men. They don't lie, so that's what a crucifixion must mean. A crucifixion literally means to ascend 1,000-fold. And miraculously within the human body, this psychophysical seed that is real, that is secreted and fertilized within us 13 times per year, gets all the way back up to the blood-brain barrier, and it needs help to get up into the brain from the body. And it crosses over the blood-brain barrier via what's called the pneumogastric nerve, or the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve it forms the tree of life. So it goes all the way down. Pneumo is lungs and gastric is stomach. So it basically goes all the way down to the sacrum, which happens to us and needs to happen to us continually, because it is also very symbolic. And it's the symbolism of going from the left brain to the right brain, leaving the carnal world where they control to the right brain where God exists in eternal peace and balance and harmony. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, fascinating. I've always said, and I've said this to Karen, that the Bible's describing us. The things to say, because one of the things I was taught was, it's just literally about the words, and you're saying about these people didn't exist, and I fully understand that. But when they teach you in the church, they'll say, when so-and-so's talking to someone else, put your name there. And that sort of stuck with me, and as I've got further on of learning different things and that, I'm like, yeah, it is talking about us, anxiety, happiness, illness. It's about us. It's a book describing us, and you've just added that extra bit, well, a big, massive bit about the functions of the body, not just the mind. You just put it all together, and it's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Charlie. I can't wait for the next bit.
Wow, thank you, Patricia. And again, if just to tie it all in here at the end of this part one is remember this: the message that is taught to us in the sky by astrology is the same message that is in every one of these ancient sacred books. There's virtually little difference between any of them. We're not divided, and there should be no religious wars, because they're all talking about the same God. Mohammed is Christ Jesus, and Buddha is Christ Jesus, and Krishna means Christ. Krishna, Christ Jesus, and Dionysus is Christ Jesus. They're all the same person, all talking about the same God, all talking about the same thing, human physiology. That's why they tell the same story. So it's a diamond. It's a diamond. We'll get into this in the second part that ties flat Earth and back into flat Earth as well. Everything is a diamond. 4 points. 4 points. Okay, so the astrology in the night sky, point 1. Down onto the Earth, the Holy Land tells the same story, and the Holy Land is that second point, and then the ancient spiritual texts all tell the same story, and then down at the base of the diamond is the human being, and we tell the same story. Our physiology is shaped exactly like, tells the same story as astrology in the night sky. It's brilliant. I'm not brilliant. This story is brilliant, and I'm just a better person for knowing it and being able to share it. Hopefully,
I forgot about that. Yeah, it's like I said, it's been fascinating, and like I said, I can't wait for part 2. So, but thank you very, very much for coming on and talking to us, to everyone. And I just want to say I love you, and I love everyone that's listening and watching, and I love you, Karen, too, very, very much.
and thank you both so much. And our love, my love and Colleen, are with you always as well, because love is the answer. Love is the way. Love is the right hemisphere of the human brain. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Love you all.